In 1957, on a 100-degree afternoon outside Sallisaw, Oklahoma, a country mechanic named Delbert Pruitt tuned the carburetor on a 6-year-old Ford while a brand-new Mercury hardtop sat idling beside it, vapor locking in the heat. The Mercury's salesman laughed at the old Ford. Pruitt freed one stuck flap in the exhaust, dropped 2 jet sizes for the dry air, and fattened the accelerator pump a single turn. They ran a quarter-mile down a section road. The new Mercury bogged and lost by 3 car lengths. The move that kept the old Ford breathing cool is number 14 on this list, and there is not a mechanic alive today under 50 who could do it without a laptop. They understood carburetors, not because they were engineers, but because the carburetor was something a man could open, see into, and reason about with his own hands. A float, a needle, a jet, a pump. When the engine stumbled, a country mechanic of the 1950s pulled the air cleaner, watched the throttle plates, and knew. We traded that for a sealed fuel injection module that costs $900 and a scan tool that only tells you which sealed module to buy next. We did not lose this because cars got faster. We lost it because the carburetor was repairable by a person, and an industry decided that was the problem. Number 26 needed nothing but a single strand of copper wire, and it freed up more top-end pull than a modern $1,200 throttle body kit. Number 17 gave a heavy 4-barrel sedan a second wind, so sudden it walked away from cars that left the factory a decade later. And number 3, the rebuild every country mechanic did for $4.95 on a kitchen table in 1959 has been quietly engineered out of existence because the part that replaced it is the single most profitable item in any modern shop. These 30 secrets were not about going fast. They were about understanding the one device that decided how an engine breathed. The carburetor was a conversation between air and fuel, and these men spoke it fluently. That language has been sealed inside a black box no driver is allowed to open. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 30 carburetor secrets that 1950s country mechanics used to outrun brand new cars. Number 30, setting the idle mixture by ear. You warmed the engine, turned each mixture screw in until the idle stumbled, then backed them out until it smoothed and lifted, the highest steady idle found by sound alone. A country mechanic in 1954 Tennessee did it faster than a modern shop boots its software and never charged for what his ears had taught him. He did not adjust the carburetor. He listened to it find its breath. Number 29, setting the float level. You pulled the air horn, held the float to height, and bent the tang with a screwdriver. Too high, it flooded rich. Too low, it starved it up top. 1/16 of an inch was the gap between a bog and a launch. A Plymouth man in 1956 Georgia set floats by feel, the way his father had shown him. He set it like a man setting a watch. Number 28, reading the carburetor off one plug. You ran the engine hard, shut it down at speed, and pulled a plug before it idled back. Light tan was right, sooty black was rich, chalky white was lean and dangerous. One plug told you whether the carburetor was choking the engine or feeding it. An apprentice in 1958, Missouri was not trusted with a screwdriver until he could read it cold. The plug was the carburetor's report card. Number 27, testing the accelerator pump shot. You worked the throttle by hand and watched the nozzles. 2 clean streams meant a strong pump. A dribble meant a flat spot off the line. You set the rod until the squirt hit, hard and instant. A country mechanic in 1955 set it fat for the dirt roads he lived on. That stream was the difference between a stumble and a clean launch, and off the line it was worth a car length. Number 26. Opening the main jets. When the engine ran lean up top, you did not buy a new carburetor. You pulled the brass jets and passed a single strand of copper wire through them. Then a numbered drill, one size at a time, reading the plugs after each change. A flathead breathing through opened jets pulled harder past 50 than any showroom car of its year. The wire cost nothing. Knowing where to stop cost 4 years. Number 25. Tuning the metering rods. A tapered rod rode in the main jet and lifted under load to feed more fuel. You swapped the rod or the spring beneath it to change when the engine got its extra breath. A driver in 1959 in Kentucky made a stock sedan leap by changing one spring between 2 fingers and beat cars he could never have afforded to buy. The rod metered the fuel. The man metered the rod. Number 24. Tuning the idle with a vacuum gauge. You hooked the hose to a manifold port and turned the mixture screws for the highest steady reading. A needle that held at 20 inches meant the carburetor breathed clean. The gauge cost $4.95. A truck mechanic in 1957 Nebraska tuned by it in 2 minutes between runs, because every minute the rig sat was money it did not earn. 1 gauge, 1 needle, a carburetor in tune. Number 23. Setting the choke pull-off. On a cold start, the choke closed to richen the mixture. Then a vacuum diaphragm cracked it open the instant the engine fired. You bent the linkage to the gap in the manual. Too little, and it loaded black. Too much, and it stalled cold. A country mechanic set it by the first cough of a January morning when a no start meant a man missed his shift. He taught the cold engine when to let go. Number 22. Matching the power valve. Inside a Holly, a spring-loaded valve opened under low vacuum to dump fuel when you stood on it. You read the vacuum at full throttle and matched the valve to open just before the engine ran lean so it never stumbled wide open. A dirt track man in 1958 Alabama matched them through the seat of his pants, with prize money riding on it. That valve was the line between pulling and falling flat. Number 21. Knife edging the throttle plates. You pulled the plates and filed the leading edge to a thin taper so air slipped past instead of tumbling over a blunt brass disc. The engine breathed freer and answered quicker. 20 minutes with a file. A country mechanic in 1956 Texas did it for a boy who could not afford new and made the old Chevy answer like a car half its age. The file removed metal. What it removed was hesitation. Here is something nobody is tracking. The men who could tune a carburetor by ear are nearly all gone. The youngest are deep into their 80s. They were the last to know the carburetor as a living thing they could shift with a screwdriver and a steady hand. When they die, the manuals survive on eBay. The instinct does not. The instinct that lets a man face a stumbling engine and know, before he touches a tool, whether the float is high, the pump weak, or the jets lean. That took 20,000 hours of listening. No one is putting in those hours. The carburetor outlived its mechanics. We let the mechanics go first. Number 20. Cleaning a jet without changing its size. A clogged jet ran lean and hot, but you never reamed one with a drill, because a jet drilled oversize was a jet ruined. You soaked the brass in solvent overnight and blew it clear with air so the hole stayed exactly as the factory calibrated it. A Carter man in 1956 Ohio handed a carburetor back a day late rather than wrong because his name rode out the door on every engine he touched. The difference was discipline. Number 19. Setting the needle and seat. The needle rode on the float and shut off fuel when the bowl filled. A worn seat let fuel trickle past, and that flooded the engine, making it run rich. You lapped the brass clean, or you dropped in a fresh needle, then set the float to match. A Buick man in Ohio in 1955 kept a drawer of needles sorted like a watchmaker, because to him a flooded engine was a personal embarrassment. The bowl decided everything after. Number 18, slipping a spacer under the carburetor. You slid a thin phenolic plate between the carburetor and the hot intake to keep the fuel bowl cool. A cool carburetor made a denser charge and pulled harder than the same car run hot. A mechanic in 1957 Arizona cut his own from sheet stock for 50 cents because out there, a vapor lock on a grade left a family stranded with no shade and no phone. He put insulation between the fuel and the fire. Number 17, tuning the vacuum secondary spring. On a 4-barrel, the back 2 throttles opened on demand through a spring-loaded diaphragm. A heavy spring held them shut, and the engine fell flat. A light one opened them early, and the car surged. You matched the spring until the secondaries came in exactly when the driver wanted them. A racer in Carolina in 1959 carried a tin of springs like a fisherman's hooks. On Saturday night, that tin was the difference between a trophy and a tow-home. Number 16, rejetting for altitude. Thin mountain air needs less fuel, or the engine runs fat and lazy, so you drop 2 jet sizes for the high country and put them back in the valley, and the car that bogged at 7,000 feet pulled clean. A freight hauler in 1957 carried the jets in a tobacco tin on the seat beside him because a loaded truck that lost power on a pass was a paycheck that did not arrive. He jetted for the road he was on. Number 15, changing the accelerator pump cam. A small cam decided how much the pump squirted and how fast. You moved it to a different hole to tailor the shot to the engine. A quick cam killed the off-idle stumble and made the car snap off the line. A country mechanic in 1958 Indiana kept 3 in his shirt pocket and matched the shot to how a man drove, the way a tailor cuts to the man. The squirt shaped the launch. Number 14, freeing the heat riser. A flap in the exhaust forced heat into the intake to warm a cold carburetor. Stuck shut, it cooked the fuel and the engine percolated and stalled in the heat. You freed the flap with penetrating oil until it swung loose. This is the move Delbert Pruitt used in Oklahoma. A free riser meant a car that ran hard in July while a new one starved on the shoulder. He let the carburetor breathe cool on a hot day. Number 13, opening the idle air bleed. A tiny passage mixed air into the idle fuel, and when an engine idled rough and rich, no matter how you set the screws, you cleaned or slightly opened that bleed, and the idle steadied. Most men never knew it existed. A Rochester specialist in 1956, Illinois, tuned bleeds the factory called non-adjustable and fixed in 5 minutes what other shops chased for a week. The screws got the credit. The bleed did the work. Number 12, the lean drop idle set. You set the idle for highest vacuum, turned each mixture screw in until the engine dropped 50 RPM, then backed out to recover it, the leanest clean idle the engine would hold without stumbling. A shop foreman in 1959 in Ohio made his apprentices repeat it until they could feel the drop without a gauge. The factory taught it. The trade schools dropped it by 1980. The lean drop found the edge without falling off. Number 11, clearing the float bowl vent. A small tube let the bowl breathe so fuel could flow, and if you plugged it with road grime, the engine would starve under hard pull and surge at idle. You cleared it with a strand of wire and a shot of air. A country mechanic in 1958 Virginia chased a phantom miss for an hour and found it in a vent the size of a pencil lead. The smallest hole decided whether the biggest one fed. The carburetor did not die because it stopped working. It died because it worked too well in the wrong hands. A man could rebuild it on his own table for the price of a sandwich, and the industry could not sell much against that. So it was replaced, circuit by circuit, with sealed fuel injection that no driver is allowed to open. In 2021, the right to repair movement won a partial victory in Massachusetts, forcing automakers to share diagnostic data. The industry spent over $25 million fighting it, and the fights continue. The dealership service network in this country earns over $116 billion a year, and that number depends on you never understanding what feeds your engine. The carburetor was a $4.95 rebuild you could do yourself. That is exactly why it was taken from you. Number 10, setting the linkage on a progressive dual quad. With two 4-barrels, you ran the front carburetor for everyday driving and brought the rear in only at full throttle because the linkage decided when that second carburetor woke up. Set right, a big engine sipped fuel around town, then opened both throats and surged. A country mechanic in 1959 California set the progression by ear, so a family sedan could embarrass a sports car and never spill the groceries. Gentle until it was not. Number 9, adjusting the choke spring tension. The thermostatic coil decided how far the choke closed when cold and how fast it opened when warm. You rotated the cover a notch at a time until the engine started clean on the first cold morning and came off the choke without loading up. A country mechanic in Minnesota in 1956 set chokes by how a January engine answered the key, where a hard start at dawn could cost a man his fingers to the cold. He read the spring. Number 8, smoothing the air horn. The casting where air entered the carburetor was rough from the factory mold. You took a file and emery cloth and smoothed the bore until air slid in clean instead of tumbling over the ridges, and the throttle felt sharper up top. An hour of patient work, the trade of a man with time, but no money to buy speed. A racer in 1958 Tennessee swore it was worth 5 horsepower he never paid for. He took away what was in the way. Number 7, feeding the carburetor cold air. Hot underhood air robbed power, so you ran a duct that fed the carburetor cool air from in front of the radiator instead of the heat baking off the manifold. Cold air was dense air, and dense air made power. A driver in 1957 in Oregon picked up real speed on a hot day with a length of stovepipe and tin snips, a man with no money and a good idea, beating cars worth 10 times his. He went and found the cold. Number 6, rejetting with the seasons. Cold winter air is dense and wants more fuel. Hot summer air is thin and wants less. So you changed jets twice a year, the way other men changed oil, fattening the mixture for the cold and leaning it for the heat, and the engine pulled its best in every season. A farmer in Iowa in 1955 kept 2 sets in a coffee can. To him, it was the same respect he gave his fields. He changed with the weather. The factory never did. Number 5, matching the timing to the tune. A carburetor and an ignition were one system, not 2. After you set the mixture, you brought up the timing until the engine pulled hardest, easing it back the instant you heard the faint rattle. A man in 1956 Tennessee tuned by EAR on the open highway. The road was the only dyno he could afford, and his ear was the only gauge he trusted. The carb fed the fire. The timing lit it at the right instant. Number 4, reading the exhaust to confirm the tune. After every carburetor job, you walked to the tailpipe and looked. A clean, dry pipe meant the mixture was right. A wet black ring meant rich. A bone-white pipe meant lean and dangerous. 20 seconds confirmed an hour of work. A country mechanic in 1957 trusted the pipe over any gauge because the exhaust could not lie. General Motors engineers admitted in 2018 that it still beats the sensor that replaced it. The pipe told the truth. Number 3, the kitchen table rebuild. A complete kit for a Rochester or a Holly cost $4.95 in 1959. Gaskets, needle, seat, pump, diaphragm, float. A country mechanic spread newspaper on the kitchen table and rebuilt the carburetor in 2 hours, and the engine ran like new for another 80,000 miles. The same job today means a $480 Riemann unit or a $2,400 conversion. The carburetor was not eliminated because it failed. It was eliminated because a person could fix it. Number 2, the Sunday idle check. Every Sunday before church, a country mechanic started the cold engine in the yard and listened while it idled. A clean idle meant the carburetor was right. A hunting, surging idle meant something had drifted, and he caught it before it stranded him on a Tuesday. The AAA found in 1968 that drivers who inspected weekly had 70% fewer breakdowns. He did not tune every Sunday. He listened every Sunday. Number 1, listening to the engine to set the mixture. That is all. You warmed it, rested a hand on the air cleaner, and turned the screw a few degrees at a time, listening for the moment the idle lifted, steadied, and ran its cleanest. No gauge, no light, no tool but your own ear and the patience to use it. Every other secret on this list was built on top of this one act. The carburetor was always telling you what it needed. Number 1 was the willingness to listen until you heard it. None of these secrets required a certification, a scan tool, or a subscription to a database. They required a willingness to open the one part of the engine that decided how it breathed, and to believe you could understand it. That belief was the default in every country garage in America. Not knowledge from a classroom, but intimacy. Built one carburetor at a time until a man could hear a lean idle across the yard and know which screw to turn. It built cars that left brand new ones behind on a section road, tuned by men who never finished high school. We did not lose the carburetors. They are still in the barns and the swap meets and the bottoms of toolboxes. We lost the hands that could set afloat by feel, and the men who stood beside us and said, "Listen, turn it in until it stumbles, then back it out. There, hear that? That is what right sounds like." The next time your engine runs away, it did not run yesterday. Do not reach for the phone. Open the hood. Listen. A country mechanic would have heard it on the first idle.